We'll go over some brief housekeeping, a welcome and an introduction to the CAN Learning Academy. Then our CAN Learning Academy Dean, Angela Ellison, will take it away and talk about how your CAN can change the world. And we'll close with some homework or talking about the homework and next steps. So now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Lisa, for housekeeping.
Thank you, Olivia, and hi, everybody. First of all, this session is being recorded and will be posted on the EPIC website. All participants are muted upon entry, and we ask that you remain muted to limit background noise. We encourage the use of the chat box to ask questions or post comments. All questions will be captured in the chat box and we'll address as many as we can. Next, if you can hear me, you're likely connected correctly, but we'll do a quick review. After you join the meeting by clicking the meeting link, an audio conference box may appear. You can join by either computer audio or phone. To join by computer audio, click computer audio and you should be all set. To join by phone, dial the given number, enter the meeting ID and press pound. Then enter your given participant ID and press pound. You will then be connected to this session's audio via phone. Next, to access the chat box, please click on the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. A sidebar will appear to the right. Type your questions or comments into the chat box and send them to everyone. Again, we encourage the use of the chat box for any questions or comments during this session. Lastly, we will be engaging you today through Poll Everywhere, and you can participate via text or web browser. To participate via text, please send Healthy Start 428 to 22333. No spaces and capitalization does not matter. When you have successfully joined our session, you'll receive a confirmation text as you see on the screen. Additional tips for Poll Everywhere. Again, capitalization does not matter, but spacing does. You only need to send Healthy Start 428 once. After that, send a normal text message to 22333 to participate in the polls. If texting does not work, you can visit pollev.com/Healthy Start 428 on a web browser on your phone or computer. There will be no charges to your cell phone beyond what your phone carrier typically charges for a text message. That's all for housekeeping, and I will now turn it to Ken.
Thanks so much, Lisa and Olivia. It's so good to be with everyone this afternoon. I hope that you guys have brought lots of energy. I think the CAN is the right place to have that energy. So thank you for being here. Just a couple of words with regards to what we're up to and the excitement we have here at the TA and Support Center. We want you to know that the center is here to support you and all of your TA needs, especially around the Community Action Network. We've had a CAN cohort, we'll have another, we have webinars, and we also are available for one-on-one support. Should you need support around your CAN, feel free to reach out to us through the usual way of either going to the website or sending us an email. We'd be more than happy to follow with you on supporting you around your CAN. The Community Action Network, I'd just like to look back 30 years ago when Healthy Start started in 1991. The CAN was called a consortium, and the language that was used, which is still used in the legislative language today, is community-based, community-driven. And one thing that we knew about, whether you're calling it the consortium or today the CAN has always been a vehicle to move change at the community level, really getting into the community at the grassroots level. And that's why it's such a powerful vehicle to use to move systems change. And the Learning Academy is really about that. And you'll learn more about a Learning Academy in a little while. But again, think of yourself as a CAN, a vehicle to move change, and really at the community level where we really need to have that impact. So community-based, community-driven were words that were always used, and the CAN became the hallmark of the Healthy Start program. It's always important to remember that Healthy Start was the first federal program to actually require community engagement through its consortium, and now CAN. It was part of the requirement to implement a Healthy Start program. Today, everyone talks about community engagement and has some sort of community group, but historically, the Healthy Start program was the first to require it as part of a funding requirement. And so again, you all are in the position, in the best position in this nation today to really move the issues around equity and racism at a community level because you know how to do it. And so again, you're here because you have a vehicle and you're ready to drive this. So there's a breadth of the work around the Community Action Network. And then today we want to start this journey on getting into the depth of what to do, how to do to really move an agenda forward. So we welcome you. And just a couple of other things to say for introduction, if you go to the next slide. Many years ago, 56 years ago, so you can go to the next one. So your can change the world is the theme that our dean has given us. And so we're going to ride with that. But 56 years ago, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave an address to Howard University, a historical Black college. Go ahead and click again for me. And I think it's important as far as setting context for what this academy is going to be about. It's just to think, just looking back over our history. Again, this week we've acknowledged the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and really we've had great accomplishments with regards to a letter that's been signed by 4 leading organizations in MCH addressing and making a commitment to addressing racism as a public health issue. But when we look back, this is an address, words that came from the president of the country over 56 years ago. In 1965. 200 years ago in 1765, 9 assembled colonies first joined together to demand freedom from arbitrary power. For the first century, we struggled to hold together the first continental union of democracy in the history of man. 100 years ago, that is in 1865, following a terrible test of blood and fire, the compact of the union was finally sealed. For the second century, we labored to establish a unity of purpose and interest among many groups which make up the American community. That struggle has often brought pain and violence. It is not yet over. The struggle is not yet over. This was said by the president in 1965, over 56 years ago. Go to the next statement, just to highlight a couple of other, the next slide, please. To highlight a couple of other points, 3 important points. Go right ahead and populate the slide for me, Lisa. First, he said, but freedom is not enough. And so when we think about 1865, freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying, now that you are free, go where you want and do what you desire and choose the leaders you please. The second point he makes in his speech also, you do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him to the starting line of a race and then say, you're free to compete with the others and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. And the third point he made, he says, thus, it is not enough just to open gates of opportunity. All of our citizens must have the ability to walk through those gates. The president was speaking equity even back then. What has happened since 1965? Next slide, please. He talked about the causes of inequalities, and we talk about equity, in which we are, the nation is talking about, the world is talking about it, but he pointed out the causes of inequality back then in 1965. Go ahead and populate this for me. And he says, we know the 2 broad basic reasons, and we do know that we have to act. First, he says, Negroes are trapped, inherited in gateless poverty. But there is a second cause, much more difficult to explain, more deeply grounded, more desperate in its force. It is the devastating heritage of long years of slavery and a century of oppression, hatred, and injustice. So again, looking back, it's important to understand where we come from, but the President Johnson understood this in 1965. Next slide, please. He also stated there, and this came forth in the Moynihan report, which many folks know about. And so Richard Moynihan worked under this president. So in March of 1965, this report was released that said, in essence, the Negro community has forced into a matriarchal structure, which imposes a crushing burden on the Negro male and in consequences on a great many American women as well. The impact of unemployment on the Negro family and particularly on the Negro male is least understood in all developments and contributed to the present crisis. Wow, 1965, you could almost say that now. This is a little analysis that there has been almost no inquiry. So in order to impact poverty in Black community, policy changes should focus on strengthening families. Again, that sounds like a healthy start because we're talking about strengthening families. And so that's a good report to look back on in order to leap forward, because a lot of things were laid out, and certainly as a vehicle, we now should be able to move in 2021. Next slide. And this report also says these powerful statements: the racist virus in American bloodstream still affects us. This was said over 56 years ago. Is that true today? Next, click again. And also in that document, 3 centuries, today we're talking 400 years, 4 centuries, 3 centuries of sometimes unimaginable mistreatment have taken their toll on Negro people. And there are other communities that we can now look at in this country, our Native community, as we have understood more. So again, you have this powerful vehicle, and we want to engage you. We have our Dean, Angela Ellis, who's going to help take us through this journey. You're in a powerful position to truly change what happens in communities around the country. Next slide. And so as I close, I wanted to just give a word to a resource that we'll be using throughout this academy. One of your reading that you'll hear more about with Angela later. But I want to read this as I close. It says, our nation's founders wrote that all people are created equal with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Therefore, the principles of equality and equal opportunity are deeply rooted in our national values and in the notion that everyone has a fair shot to succeed with hard work. However, our nation's social and economic well-being depends in part on the well-being of its communities, and many are facing great and evolving changes. Across the country, there are communities with insufficient access to jobs, adequate transit, safe and affordable housing, parks and open space, healthy food options, or quality education, the necessary conditions and opportunities to fully thrive. This lack of opportunity is particularly evident in the disparities that exist in health status and health outcomes between different zip codes and census tracts. You're going to enjoy this journey because it really goes deeper and really focuses on supporting you and moving work through your CAN and addressing issues of equity. It's a perfect opportunity for the Healthy Start community to strengthen the work that you do at the community level and use your CAN to really do the systems change that no one else in the nation is positioned as well as you are. And so we're excited to have you. We're excited to have Angela Ellison with us as our Dean of the Academy, and other folks that she'll talk about that we'll bring to you as we go through the Academy. But first, you might want to know, what is a Learning Academy? So I want to pass it back to Olivia to share what the Academy is all about, and then we'll get to Angela in a little bit. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ken. So just want to remind everyone that the Learning Academies provide an opportunity for Healthy Start grantees to participate in curriculum-based courses on specific topics associated with the 4 Healthy Start approaches and 19 Healthy Start benchmarks, such as the CAN, fatherhood, and other topics. The Learning Academy builds Healthy Start staff knowledge and prepares them to apply their learnings to their Healthy Start program's day-to-day activities. Next slide, please. So Learning Academies consist of monthly virtual sessions, as well as required readings and homework assignments. And all sessions are recorded and posted to the EPIC website. And we plan to one day format those in an e-learning format for those who cannot attend these live sessions, so that they can revisit them and also participate in the Academy. Next slide, please. So the CAN Learning Academy specifically aims to empower grantees to elevate their CAN to address maternal and child health disparities and other disparities by implementing CAN activities that are developed using a racial equity lens. Next slide, please. And just want to remind everyone that this is a 6-part series. So our first session is today, and these sessions will run through October. They're the 3rd Thursday of every month, except for the final one, which will be the 4th, I believe, Thursday. Next slide, please. So before we hand it over to Angela, we just wanted to do a quick pre-test to sort of get an idea of where everyone stands right now with their CAN. This is anonymous, and so it should have popped up on your screen. And if you could all just take a minute to complete this poll, that will help us have an idea of where you are right now. All right, thank you, everyone. So now I'm going to hand it over to Angela.
Guess I got to remember to unmute. Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Ellison, and I'll talk a little bit about who I am, but I first want to acknowledge and thank Ken. That powerful open made me want to say amen. The church is now open because we're getting ready to move forward and do some things. So thank you, Ken and Olivia, for all your help Ken, thank you for inviting me to be the dean for this academy. I'm super excited and pumped about what Healthy Starts can do to change the world, because I know we are well positioned, as you articulated, to change the world. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me. Those of you who don't know me, my name, as I said, is Angela Ellison. I am the Senior Director at UIC Office of Community Engagement. But more importantly, I think, is what I usually say is I have been around Healthy Start since its inception in 1991. I have played every role in Healthy Start. I've been a consortium chair, an evaluator, a project director. Only thing I haven't been was a participant. And that's because I had my baby right before Healthy Start started. So I have been around a while and have seen the many iterations that Healthy Start has gone through over these vast 30 years, because we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. So I'm really excited to be at this point in time in history. And I know, and I'm going to probably say this a lot and you'll hear it a lot, but we are definitely well positioned to change the world, to move the envelope on racial equity and health equity in our communities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And you'll hear my stories as I go through this academy, as we hang together for these next 6 months. But I just want to welcome you all for taking the time out to really focus on how you can move your can and impact change in your communities. Next slide, please. So before we get started, we're going to do a couple of, I must also tell you that this is not going to be an academy where we do all the talking. This, particularly today, is really about getting to know you, getting you ready to go on this journey with us. And I'm calling it a journey because this is going to be, we spend the next 6 months together and taking a journey on changing the world. And so this session is to get you ready to pack your bags so you know what to put in your bag so we can take this journey and be successful at the end and have a good time as we go. So get ready. We're going to take a journey. Next slide, please. So let's have a little fun. Just participate in your first poll. What state is your Healthy Start in? Guess we'll get to see that as people respond. We're going to do a couple of icebreakers just to warm us up, because I know we've all probably been on calls all day. I know I have been. California, we see there. Oh, else? I suggest California, Oregon, Kansas, Illinois. Tamala's responding. New York. Look at us all over the country. Wisconsin, from the east to the west and the north to the south. Let's see, do I see anybody from the south? Norfolk, Virginia, got another California, West Virginia, Kansas. I'm looking at the chat. Georgia, hey Georgia, Kansas City, go Cats, Ohio, New York City. This is wonderful. Any more responses? North Carolina, Illinois, yes. You're using your poll everywhere. So Ken, we got a good mix. We all over this country, as we know Healthy Start is. Okay, we can go on to the next one. Now this one's a little more fun. Let's see what you all wanted to be when you were a child. We all had that dream. Are we living the dream? What did you want to be? A doctor, fireman? And what did you want to be? A social worker. Oh, wow, Carol, did you? Teacher. I know I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, a lawyer, a professional dancer. I wanted to be a store owner, and I had the name of my store was the Lucky Penny. So I was ready. It didn't turn out that way. A figure skater, photographer, kindergarten teacher, big cat doctor. Oh my. Oh wow, we got a couple of them. We got some animal vets in the house. Egyptologist. The next Oprah Winfrey. I want to know who that is. Who said that one? I just really want to know. A teacher. Because the next Oprah Winfrey, we're going to give you a chance to show out to doing this academy. Actress and lawyer. Okay. This is exciting. There's some similarities. Some figure skating and some doctors, big cat doctors. I think the timer comes. The problem is I'm too shy to say in front of people like Oprah. Okay, that is funny. Veronica, that's funny. All right. Are we? I want to be rich and still do. Me too. Right, Melody? Yes. Model. Yes. That I never wanted to be a model. That wasn't my gift. I knew that. We can go on to the next slide. Your real icebreaker now. That was not my gift. So now we get to have a little more fun. So if you thought you were just going to sit back and drink coffee in your living room or in front of the computer in this academy, nope. We're going to put you to work right away. I'm going to get them brains started. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into real breakout rooms for a little bit, few minutes, a little bit of time, because I know we're at 1:30 already, and we got an hour and a half, and it'll probably go super duper fast. So, well, I say 1:30 because I'm in Central Time, just so you guys know. I know many of you are probably in other time zones, but I'm in Central Time. So if I refer to a time, I'm usually doing it from Central Standard Time. So we're going to get together and get to know each other a little bit better. And you're going to introduce yourselves, what Healthy starts you with, and you're going to take this time to find as many things in common as you can. And then I'm going to come back and ask the groups to report out and what you're going to win for the groups that can come up with the most alikes, the most. You'll have bragging rights for the rest of the academy. That's what we got. Ken hasn't given me unlimited money to just pass out, but you'll have bragging rights for the rest of the conference if you can come up with the most likes in common. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah.
What was you
I was
gonna
gonna say those bragging rights are gonna have to satisfy today.
Bragging rights for the whole academy. We can acknowledge you every academy. So we can break them up in for a few minutes. We'll get maybe about 5 or 6 minutes, Olivia.
Perfect. All right.
Okay, everybody should be back in the next few seconds.
Okay, cool.
So nice to see people off camera. Nice.
I know. I like to see the faces in there smiling. That makes me happy. That is wonderful. I see smiling.
Let me say hey and see my Angela I ain't seen in years. Hey, my Angela Ellison.
Who is that? Hey, Miss Victoria Fowler. It's good seeing you. It's good seeing these happy faces. Wonderful. So I'm going to have to call out groups. And now I don't have a name for you groups yet. When you get together again, and just as I believe it was Lisa was saying, this is the cohort, the people you just met, you will be with for the rest of this journey. They will be your traveling companions. So I'm hoping you got to know each other. You will see them anytime we do a breakout, you'll be breaking out with that same group of people. So we're going to do that again later on with actually some work attached to it. But what I want you to do when you get together again is give your group a name so I'll know who I'm calling. So I'll know what I'm calling your cohort, because right now I'm doing this blind. And if you know the names of the people in your cohort, whoever's going to tell me how many things you found alike, that would be great. Oh, we're the winners. Carol Melton says we're the winners. So Carol, I'm going to call on you first. How many people, how many things did you find alike in your group?
9 or 10.
9 or 10 alikes. Okay. Now 9 or 10 is.
We actually we came up with a few more at the very end, Carol. We were at 15.
Yes. 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
15.
Wow.
15 things alike. Give me a few examples. What were some of the things you guys had in common besides working for Healthy Start? Anything unique?
I knew that they were going to ask. Okay, so we are all human. We possess all 5 senses. We all work with families. We're all on this call together. We've been with Healthy Start for more than 1 year. We all have a lot to learn. We're all navigating the pandemic. We've all had parents at one time or another. Glad tomorrow is Friday. Like music, we like to read. We're all adults. We all own a car, and we all wear more than one hat. And we all work for Healthy Start, but you said not to include that one, but I included it.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you so much. I hope I'm saying your name right, Juliet. Okay,
You are, yeah.
Thank you. We got 15. Anybody got higher than 15? All right, Laura. Did I see you raise your hand?
You did. We actually had 16.
Give me a few.
I'll give you a few. We're all females in our group. We're all high school graduates. We're all college graduates.
Oh, look
We're all parents. We love cats. We love dogs. We love food. How's that?
I love the love food one. That's my cohort right there.
fan.
Cohort. Okay, we got 15 and 16. Any more than those? Not like I'm gonna let the other ones rest. I want to know what the other ones. Group 2. Go group 2. That was group 2. So who is that? Carol and Juliet, group 1. Laura's group 2. Who wasn't in their groups? Anybody else? All right, go ahead.
I can go for our group. We didn't have 15 or 16, but we had a couple. A couple of us have Chicago roots or Chicago connections. A couple of us had New York City connections. A couple of us had grad school aspirations or will be attending soon. A couple of us had plant/gardening interests, and we were all kind of focused on the CHW community health worker realm.
Cool. Go group 3. Thank you, guys. So we got group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, someone from another group that went in one of those groups.
This is Tamala. I can go.
Go
for
ahead, Tamala.
Group 5.
Okay.
So I'm going to steal from you, Guy. So yeah, we definitely all have gardening. Somebody has a cactus named Todd or Tickle. I forget what it was. Somebody had named their cactus, but we all have vegetation in our roots.
Okay.
And we're all big foodies.
I love it. That's my group too. Now you would have scared me if other people had a cactus named Todd. I would have been a little nervous. I'm like, wow, that's just weird. I didn't know that what people name their cactuses is Todd. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tamala. And Joy, I think you were getting ready to unmute.
Me, Joy?
Yes.
Okay. So I can't remember what group number we were, but we had 15. I'll just give you some of them. We all played instruments. We didn't get down to which ones we played because we're trying to come up with more. We're all right-handed. We all checked our emails today. We're all fully clothed. None of us were half naked on a Zoom. So, 100% there, we're good. We all went to college, and we all been to the dentist for our cleanings this year. So we're good.
Joy, that's excellent. That is excellent. So that was the last group, I believe. That's delightful. They all went. I don't even know how y'all got to the dentist and the cleaning of the teeth. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall for that one. So I think our bragging rights group goes to the group with 16, group 2. Am I correct?
Yes, but we're still winners.
Yes, you all are winners. Absolutely, Carol. I would definitely say nothing less. We're all winners, for sure. But thank you. And you guys know why I do that is because it's to show that we all have more in common than we even think. And we're all on this journey together. Besides working for Healthy Start, besides running a can or being a part of a can, we have so many more things alike than we have differences. And we need to build and grow on those things. So thank you for participating in that activity. And I'm going to find out who is actually in group 2. So I'll make sure you get your bragging rights every meeting to say that you won the first introductory exercise of the CAN Academy. So welcome. Again, the next slide. Now to get down to business. The next slide, please. So we are addressing racial and health equity through a collective impact efforts or facilitating system change. That's our goal. We're going to be, that's what our CAN Academies do. That's what our CAN Academies are focused on. That's what they do. That's what our CANs do. What we hope will happen over the course of these next 6 months is that you'll develop a deeper understanding on the systemic policies and practices that impact maternal and child health inequities, that you will be able to develop activities and or projects that are designed to address health equity at a system level. You will be able to develop a deeper understanding of how to deepen the focus of your current CAN in order to impact equity at a multiple levels, policy level, political level, systems level, community empowerment, the community level. You're going to be able to dig deeper into understanding how to move the envelope in your communities to create a better society, if you will, a more equitable society. To move to, if you look at this sign, many of you have probably seen this sign behind me, this picture, is to move, the last picture that you can't see is to remove the barriers and move us towards liberation in our communities. That's what we're trying to do. Participants will recognize the power of your CAN to affect changes and the outcomes in our Healthy Start communities. And that's essentially what I said. Ken just said to me a little while ago, he says he wished he was still involved with the CAN. And although I'm very glad that he's in the role that he is, I understand it. We could go to the next slide. We are at a tipping point. He opened with the tipping point in 1965, and we all know the civil rights movement and many things that happened as a result of Rosa Parks and some other things we're going to talk about later. We know the late 50s, and the 60s were a tipping point. We are at a tipping point for the first time in my lifetime that I have seen, where we can really begin to affect some changes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. But as I said, your CAN can change the world. Today's objectives is, like I said, this is all about readiness today. While we will touch and kind of go a little deep, as we go through the next 5 sessions after today, we're going to get even deeper in helping you develop the skills and the systems and the things you need to put in place to move your CAN to the next level, because that's what this is about. So today's goal is that you understand the goals of the Learning Academy. That's what we hope you walk away with today. That you will gain a deeper understanding of health equity and racial equity. Now, I know most of us, all of us have been working in this space, but do we really, really understand what it means to be dealing with racial equity and health equity? We're going to talk about that today. I'm going to be asking for your input and your thoughts around this. This is not just Angela talking to you. This is a participatory process. That's how I work. In other words, that's how I roll. I want you to be involved in this. So I'm glad to see you off camera. I want you to put questions in the chat. I want you to put your thoughts in the chat. This is about us growing and developing our CANs so that we can go back and change lives. You will begin to review, the key elements needed to address the health equity in your CAN. And you will examine your current capacity of your CAN to see if you're already positioned to move the envelope in your communities. Some of us may be more there than others. As we go through this process, we'll see. If you say, well, we're not really quite there, we're going to do some poll questions in a bit and we'll see where you think you are. That doesn't mean you don't come back next time. That means you keep coming so you can get the skills so you're ready to move your CAN by October. So we're going to be doing all of that, examining where we are and having some good dialogue and getting us there. Next slide, please. So we have each of these themes, Ken and I have met and talked about it. And so we kind of gave them like a little theme so you'll know what to expect. Today's, as I said, is we're talking about your readiness. Now we're getting ready for the journey. You're going to get your clothes together. You're going to pull out your suitcase. We're going to be getting ready for the journey. So we're assessing how ready are you to take the journey. The next one, we're going to be looking at key elements that are necessary to move and change the paradigm in your communities around your CAN. So next time we'll be getting together, we'll be talking about community engagement, identifying our champions, because at the end of the day, although we're powerful organizations in our own Healthy Starts, we can't do this alone. This work requires partnerships. It requires community collaboration at a deeper level than any way I can possibly think, in a deeper way than we've ever engaged in before. And the ground has been set to do this. I don't know about you, but I was on 3 meetings before this meeting. And in every meeting that I was in, the topic was racial equity and addressing racial disparities. I don't know if that's happening in other states, but it's happening in mine. So we're going to talk about, so that lets me know that I'm not in this alone. I got other champions out there who can go along on this ride with me. The next one, the third one, is something that was a requirement of Healthy Start, but we need to talk about it more. Data, understanding it and using it to address health inequity in order to advance equity. That was Ken's phrase and I loved it. I'm gonna say that again. Understanding it and using it to address health equity in order to address equity. Because if we don't have a roadmap a way to track the data, that we're moving the systems, then we don't know where we're going. We don't have a measurement. We've got to be able to measure what we're doing. So we're going to talk about data. We'll be bringing in presenters who are in this space throughout this academy to help us learn more about each of these things. So you won't be hearing from me all the time. I will be present. I will be doing some orientation, but I won't be your primary speaker on every session. Now by session 4, we're in the journey. We're on the plane, we're going, we riding together. We're gonna be planning together. So when we land, we know where we're gonna be going. So we riding together, we on the plane. Y'all with me? We on the plane, on the boat, whatever works for you, the train. Maybe we should take a train. We can talk a lot on the train. But we on the journey. So we're gonna talk about strategic planning, getting ready to develop that plan, to implement that plan. And then by the 5th session, we should be seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You have gone back to your plans. You've started meeting with your community partners in a different way, and you're ready to develop your plan and be able to present an idea by the final session of what you're doing, what you're going to be doing in your communities and in your CAN. So that's where we're going. Anything you want to add on this, Kim, before I move to the next one?
I think it's laid out nicely for folks, and so we'll look forward to any feedback they may have as we go along the journey. So thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So as Ken mentioned earlier, and you will get their links to these things, the books we'll be using, and there will be other tools that we'll be using and books that we'll be presenting as we're going. But to start this work, we really want you guys to use this particular book, Communities in Action, and that your homework assignment actually will come from this book, Pathways to Health Equity. And there's a link in the chat. You can link to it. You don't have to buy it. You can. And so if you're one of those people who like to touch and read books, I'm not. I like looking at it on the screen, so I have a Kindle. But if you're one of those people who like to touch a book, you can buy the book.
Or Angela, remember those of us who actually like to make notes in the book still.
Yes.
Old school, I know, but
highlight and all of that.
Highlight and
yeah. And it's a good book to highlight. Good point, Ken. It's a good book to highlight. So if you want to purchase it, please do. I think it was like $94, but maybe cheaper. I'm not sure. And then the organizational racial REJI organizational racial equity toolkit. They have a new version that was led in 2020. Powerful tools in that document, and we'll talk more about that as we go along in this academy. Next slide, please.
And as you go on to the next slide, I just wanted to point out, and we've selected this as part of the curriculum because, again, a lot of the work has been done through these great documents and toolkits, and some folks have been leading these conversations for decades, have been part of, the National Academy of Sciences and so forth with those 2 curricula that you referenced. I just wanted to let folks know why we selected those. Again, the one done last year, as well as the community pathway. So we have to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely, and that was what Kim was right. We're not starting from scratch. That's the beauty of this work. We're not starting from scratch. And as I believe Olivia just put in the chat, that everyone from Healthy Start can get one copy of this. Olivia, is that what you're saying in the chat?
Yes, so each Healthy Start project will be able to receive 1 copy. So I put a link in the chat for a form that your project director can fill out to request your copy. And then I also put the link to the book where you can download the chapters for free from that link as well.
Thank you very much. So sit back, put your seatbelt on if you want to. This is a safe ride. Maybe we're taking the train. Put your seatbelt on. We're getting ready to, we haven't packed yet. We're still packing. Let's go pack our bags. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to look back first. Where have we been? Ken gave a little bit of this earlier. Is where have we been as a CAN, the evolution of a CAN. Next slide, please. We're looking at our rear view mirror. As Ken pointed out, and I've been around since we were Healthy Starts consortiums, and there was always the intent for a Healthy Start consortium for them to be consumer-based, consumer-focused, that the participant has a loud voice in what happens in Healthy Starts. They helped design many of our Healthy Starts and what needs to be included. We had to build partnerships with other agencies and other people in our consortium. But typically, and I know here in Chicago in the Healthy Start consortiums I was involved in, most of the people at the table were people who were in the maternal child health space. And there wasn't a real way, unless you probably were some advanced Healthy Starts, to really track what was happening within those Healthy Starts. Then the last cycle, they moved those consortiums to last cycle of Healthy Start. They moved those consortiums to Community Action Networks, or CANs as we know them today. Here again, they're still they're supposed to be community driven, community involved, community based. They should be moving in parallel with your Healthy Start. In other words, besides doing your program stuff, they're above and beyond your program, and that they're trying to make things happen in the community. That's what was going on with your community action networks. They were providing education. They were trying to impact systems. The stakeholders were supposed to be varied. It wasn't supposed to be just your usual suspects in your CAN. It wasn't just supposed to be your Title V MCH director, or it wasn't just supposed to be the other community-based organization that was doing maternal and child health services in your community. It was supposed to be the police department and the educational system and all those people that interact with families in our communities. The business owners, other people. We're supposed to spread our wings and invite other people to be a part of this work. The data collection was supposed to be an integral part of what you do in tracking. And then we were utilizing at that time, and that I'm still using in my CAN, but I'm going to be switching some things, but still using in my CAN, a collective impact framework. And we're going to talk about what that means. Next slide, please. So let's listen to this video, and Ken can give us a background on this video. Ken, you want to give us a little background on the video?
Yeah, and it's Paul Smithson. There's a great book on community leadership, and he has been part of FSG, the folks who brought us the collective impact many, many years ago. And this is a video that he put together to really describe what collective impact looks like, because it's really answering the question of how change happens. And so it's just a great look back to leap forward as we look back into the civil rights movement. And again, people know some names from the civil rights, like the Rosa Parks, but really what went on, and it was it just Rosa Parks? So this is a great compilation that looks at collective impact. And while it's not a required component, it certainly has been a suggested framework for the CANs. And so it's just helpful to understand it. And even if you haven't been like fully trained on collective impact, you'll get the idea of kind of what really happens and what is most likely going on with all of your community action networks. And that is really pulling everyone together, all the partners Angela's talked about, really working collaboratively around this common goal. And so this is just a great example. And so we wanted to share that with you. But again, there's a reference to the book at the end if you're interested in getting that book around community leadership.
We all know the story of Mrs. Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. We learned it in school as a neat, tidy story of individual heroism. Mrs. Parks, a seamstress tired after a hard day at work, courageously sat down. A young preacher, Dr. Martin Luther King, charismatically stood up. They inspired people to march, and change happened. Well, let me tell you the story in a way you might not have heard it before. Let's begin with Rosa Parks. Born in 1913, she was the granddaughter of slaves. She was a good student, soft-spoken, but strong-willed. Her family believed in standing up against mistreatment. One time when a white boy on roller skates tried to push her off the sidewalk, she pushed back. Mrs. Parks reflected later, "I'd rather be lynched than run over by them." In 1931, she met Raymond Parks, a self-taught, politically active barber. He was the first man she deemed radical enough to marry. He was active in the Scottsboro 9 case, in which 9 young men had been falsely accused of rape. The Communist Party of America financed their defense, and Mr. Parks became an activist in the effort. In December 1943, Mrs. Parks attended her first NAACP meeting. She was the only woman there and was elected group secretary that day, a position she'd hold for the next 12 years. As secretary, she recorded countless cases of unfair treatment, brutality, sexual violence, and lynchings. The local president of the NAACP and her partner for over a decade was Edie Nixon, a member of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union, who had also been active in registering voters, including Mrs. Parks. He and Parks were the first working-class people to lead a local NAACP. They were eventually elected as state president and secretary as well. Through the NAACP, Miss Parks attended meetings in Jacksonville, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., where she received leadership training from the legendary NAACP organizer Ella Baker, who became a role model and mentor to her. Miss Baker also inspired Parks to create a youth council in Montgomery. Fred Gray was a 24-year-old attorney who had recently moved to town, only the second African-American lawyer in Montgomery and the 12th in the state. Rosa Parks took him under her wing, regularly meeting him for lunch and encouraging him to take on civil rights work. Clifford and Virginia Dewar were the town's leading white liberals. One day, Mrs. Parks was working for Virginia Dewar when they discussed her NAACP work. Mrs. Dewar suggested she attend the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, where integrated groups of activists developed their leadership in civil disobedience. Clifford Dewar was a board member, and the Dewars raised money to send Miss Parks to a 2-week-long workshop on civil rights. At Highlander, she and 47 other diverse activists lived in an integrated community and developed their strategies and tactics as leaders. She came to admire Highlander director Miles Horton's spirit and sense of humor. She was in awe of Septima Clark, the lead instructor who, like Miss Baker, became a role model and mentor for her as women activists. The workshop rejuvenated her, but she was pessimistic about the prospects of a mass movement in Montgomery. While at Highlander, Claudette Colvin, the 15-year-old secretary of the Youth Council, was on her mind. On March 2, 1955, Miss Colvin refused to move to the back of the bus and was arrested. Her arrest outraged the community. While Mrs. Parks and Mrs. Dewar raised money for her case, the male leaders in town were concerned that she was too dark-skinned, poor, and young to be sympathetic plaintiff to challenge segregation. On October 21, 1955, 18-year-old Mary Louise Smith, another Youth Council member, refused to move to the back of the bus and was arrested. She was also considered too poor and young to be sympathetic. On Thursday afternoon, December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus and was arrested. The same bus driver, James Blake, had thrown Mrs. Parks off his bus in 1943 for refusing to move. She said, "I'd felt for a long time that if I was ever told to get up so a white person could sit, that I would refuse to do so." Now, does she sound like the accidental activist we've learned about in school and popular culture, the tired seamstress who just wanted to rest her feet after a hard day at work? She often said that the only thing she was tired of was being segregated and mistreated. Edie Nixon and the Dewars went to get her out of jail. Nixon saw opportunity to use Mrs. Parks' case as an ideal plaintiff to challenge segregation. Raymond Parks didn't agree. After much debate, she and Raymond made the difficult, courageous choice, knowing they'd probably lose everything as a result, and they lost a lot, including their jobs in the process. Mrs. Parks called Fred Gray and asked him to represent her. He called Joanne Robinson, a leader of the Women's Political Council, a group of African-American women who had been calling for a bus boycott. She called Edie Nixon, and they agreed to call for a bus boycott Monday, the day of Mrs. Parks' arraignment. Overnight, Miss Robinson printed more than 15,000 flyers at Alabama State College, calling for the boycott. Can you imagine making 15,000 flyers on 2014 technology, let alone 1955 technology? And this was especially risky since the university was funded by the segregationist state legislature. The Women's Political Council members met her at dawn and fanned the community with flyers. At 6 a.m., Edie Nixon phoned Reverend Ralph Abernathy of First Baptist Church and suggested a meeting of pastors that afternoon. Reverend Abernathy suggested that the newest pastor in town, Martin Luther King, at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, would be a good host because he had no set alliances, enemies, and had less to lose if it didn't work out. Dr. King was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. About 50 pastors met that night with Rosa Parks and Joanne Robinson and agreed to support the boycott from the pulpits on Sunday and announce a mass meeting for Monday night. One white pastor, Robert Grates, attended the meeting. He led Trinity Lutheran Church, an African-American congregation, and was an outcast among whites in Montgomery. He hosted Mrs. Parks' NAACP Youth Council meetings at his church and was a friend of hers. He remained an important ally throughout the boycott. His home was eventually bombed. On Saturday, Miss Parks went to Alabama State College, where she was conducting a leadership training for the NAACP. She was discouraged when only 5 students attended. She was no longer discouraged on Monday, however, when she and other leaders marveled at the empty buses and streets filled with African-American citizens walking to school and work. The boycott was on. Rufus Lewis was a businessman and rival of Edie Nixon's. He did not want Nixon to lead the new Montgomery Improvement Association that was created to sustain the boycott. So he nominated his pastor, Dr. King, to lead it, arguing that he was a neutral choice and hoping he could pull strings from behind. That is how Dr. King was drafted into movement leadership. That night, 15,000 people attended a mass meeting, and the new 26-year-old MIA president, Dr. King, gave a prophetic speech that inspired them to commit to the boycott. Mrs. Parks never spoke or was consulted on strategy. Sexism and the desire to make her into a more sympathetic plaintiff converted the experienced leader into the tired seamstress of civil rights myth. Dr. King had spoken with a pastor in Baton Rouge, where they had had a 2-week-long bus boycott in 1953, and learned about the carpool system they implemented to get residents to school, work, church, and shopping errands. He assigned Rufus Lewis to put together a transportation plan that involved 350 cars, providing thousands of rides each day for 12 months. Mrs. Parks at times worked as a dispatcher. A. Philip Randolph, leader of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union and Dean of America's Civil Rights Leadership, sent his best organizer and strategist to Montgomery to help out. Bayard Rustin was a true outsider, a former Communist Party organizer, a pacifist who was jailed for refusing to fight in World War II, and an openly gay black man in 1955. In February, when he arrived, the police had indicted 115 members of the Montgomery Improvement Association. Rustin, a devoted Gandhian who'd spent 6 months in India, recommended to Nixon that they put on their Sunday best, go down to jail, and turn themselves in. They did so, confounding city leaders. Nixon, Robinson, Parks, and King all believed to varying degrees in self-defense. They all owned guns. Nixon and King's homes had been bombed. Protesters had been attacked. King had actually applied to the governor of Alabama for a permit to carry a gun in his car. Bayard Rustin advised them to get rid of the guns, and he mentored them on nonviolent civil disobedience throughout the campaign. Many others stepped up too. Georgia Gilmore created the Club from Nowhere, and Inez Ricks created the Friendly Club to organize women to make and sell sandwiches, dinners, pies, and cakes during the week to raise money for the Montgomery Improvement Association. Every Monday, they would compete to see who could bring the most money to the mass meetings. Ella Baker and Bayard Rustin formed an organization, In Friendship, to also raise money for the movement. Miss Baker took Mrs. Parks on fundraising trips up north. In May, they hosted a fundraising event featuring Rosa Parks at Madison Square Garden that attracted 16,000 people. But Rosa Parks had been an NAACP officer and organizer for more than a decade. Her husband had been active in an effort funded by the Communist Party. So it was decided that she too was a controversial plaintiff. So another woman who'd refused to move to the back of the bus was chosen to be the lead plaintiff, Aurelia Browder. The Supreme Court struck down segregation in the case of Browder versus Gale, and on December 20th, 1956, 382 days after Mrs. Parks' courageous act, the boycott was over and the buses were integrated. So who's the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott? All of them. Social change always comes from the leadership of the many. We need all kinds of people to step up and play different roles to achieve social change. You can take any part of the civil rights movement or any other social movement and tell a similar story, and you could add many more names to this story. It does not diminish the courage of Mrs. Parks or the prophetic vision of Dr. King to acknowledge that their leadership was part of a larger leadership narrative. We need to see leadership as an action many can take, not just a position few can hold. Leadership is a muscle that everyone has, and it only gets stronger with exercise and practice. We need to build the collective leadership muscles of our organizations and communities if we want to create change. We need to support programs like Public Allies and community organizing efforts that build the leadership of the many. When the police interrogated Claudette Colvin about who was behind the boycott, she responded, "Our leaders is just we ourselves." That should be our call to action. Step up.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. That was so powerful. I was getting chills. I got chills when Ken spoke earlier. I got chills watching that video.
We all know the story of Mrs. Rosa Parks.
I have that book. I encourage others to get that book about leadership. It's phenomenal. I suggest you get it. I do have it. I don't have it nearby so I can pull it up, but I do have it. I would love for you to put in the chat while I move on to with talking through you so time doesn't waste. What are your thinkings? What's resonating with you as you heard that video? I know lots of things resonated with me when I watched it. I'm just like, really, really, as you right, Guy, stuff that they don't teach you in school. I don't know if you guys know this, so I'm letting you know today. When you woke up this morning, you might not have known that you were going to be on the path to change the world. You might not have known it, but I want to let you know, Victoria, Carol, Joy, these are the people I'm seeing on my first page: Laura, Brandy, Daisha, Tamala, Gabriella, Jennifer, Lynette, Michael, and others, because I can't see all the other pages. You're changing the world. You're on the path today to change the world. So when you introduce yourself the next time, say, I'm I'm Carol Melton, and I'm going to change the world, because we're going to all own this, because we're getting ready to change the world. You can go to the next slide. Thank you, Ken, for putting the author's name in there. So this is just all that to say what we did in the original CAN. This is from the original CAN when we used the collective impact framework. Even the mutually reinforcing activities, I want to point out for everyone to know that was from the previous cycle, not the current cycle. This was the 5 that we were held accountable for the 4th, that last cycle, not this one. So what was important, the framework of making a collective impact is that you have a common agenda. That was a key area of focus. You had to have a common agenda on what you were going to address. You have to have a way to measure it. So you had a shared way of measuring it. And when you get to start reading the book, the Communities in Action book, and you get to chapter 5, because that's one of your assignments, and you start reading the stories of the organizations that have begun to move the agenda or change health equity in their communities, it consisted of many of these elements. They had a common or shared vision. They had a way to track or measure what they were trying to do. They had mutually reinforcing activities that they all agreed on. Now, it was different people carrying out those activities, but they were clear on the approach that they were going to do. They had a way to continuously communicate. And then they had one organization or a few organizations who were your backbone organizations who were responsible for making sure things happen. You will see that. Now, whether you choose in your CAN work to use a collective impact framework or another framework, clearly these are some very important key elements to moving and changing the world. Next slide, please. So that's where we've been. Today, I went back and I actually pulled language from the NOFO. And this was the language from the NOFO for this cycle. And the third thing on it, when we had to write about the CAN, it said, describe how your program will collaboratively engage partners to develop common goals and objectives with shared outcomes and facilitate community collaboration, information sharing, and advocacy among this network. That to me was a shared vision and a common agenda. The other point 4, provide details on how your program will revise, update, and monitor activities and develop and implement, evaluate the 5-year CAN action plan to address barriers of care and improve local systems of care and address social determinants of health. That's data collection and shared measurement. Describe how your program will convene and facilitate collaborative partnerships to fulfill the approaches of Healthy Start. Describe how your program will engage a diverse group of partners who can contribute to shared outcomes that addresses the environmental and social needs that promote utilization and promotes overall health of the target population. So all of this is what our CANs are responsible for doing. And as we go on this journey, by the end of it, we're going to be able to do it. Next slide, please. And these were the other aspects of that NOFO. Describe your role with other coalitions, and that's partnerships and developing a mutually reinforcing agenda on continuous communications, activities to affect systems change. At the end of the day, when we're done with this work, it won't be the same as it was yesterday. That system will be changed in some way, whatever the system is we try to approach or deal with. Have an organization who's going to be respond and provide leadership for this work. In this case, Healthy Starts. As Ken has said, we're well positioned to be that backbone organization, that lead organization that is leading the change. Now, of course, we bring other people who are also doing this work and sit them at the table so that we can collectively do it. But Healthy Start is well positioned to do it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Next slide, please. So this is what was the Healthy Start benchmarks and what we're trying to do. And I don't need to go into this some more, but it's all saying that we all have to have a CAN and we all have to have a collective impact, not necessarily collective impact, but we all have to have a shared ability to promote system change. That's what we're trying to do. Next slide. So let's check. Let's see if you're ready. We're still packing our bags. We still got the suitcase out. Do you currently have an active CAN? Check. I know you guys all got that. Do you have active CAN leadership? Do you have an organizational culture that supports this work In other words, does your grantee organization or the organization that you work for support your CAN and the work you're trying to do? The system change you're trying to affect, the program you're trying to do, do they back you up? Do they understand it? And how is this support reflected? You're going to be exploring that over the next 6 months. Do you have CAN champions, huh? What's a CAN champion, Angela? A CAN champion is that person, that group, that body who is able to articulate what you're trying to do that doesn't necessarily work for you. That is that community partner, that community agency, that individual, that group, that participant that is out there champion your work, who is also your voice. Because if you're the only voice out there in the community, you're not nearly being as effective as you can be. You need to have champions who are speaking your language. Anything else you want to add to that, Ken? Because I know you did a lot around work around CAN champions.
No, I think that's the point, because I think we'll cover this over the 6 months too. It's really getting to talking about true partnerships, because people list folks as their partners, but it's really when you have a true partnership where you're really working together, planning together, strategizing together. Those are those champions. You carry each other's message with you. So really building that type of person, or as you say, organization or individuals or groups. Thank you.
Does your CAN leadership have the skills to develop partnerships? That is important. The person you set at the helm of your CAN who's out has got to be able to be comfortable talking to people, networking with people, being in uncomfortable places. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Do you have a vehicle or process? Were you gonna say something, Ken?
Yeah, I was just going to interject there with regards to leadership skills. This is where, again, if folks here find that that's a need within your community action network, that's when you can reach out to the TA Center if you've identified specific leadership skills that you want to explore. And so that's an opportunity to reach out to the TA Center, see how we can help you with that as you develop that. And we have some veterans in this class that will help us with that. People like Tamala Milan, who I know has done something called SEED. So we have lots of resources out there to really get into the depths of CAN leadership. And so if you need that, just reach out to the center outside of the academy. So keep taking notes, as our dean is going to tell us of stuff you may need, even as you're going through the academy. But we're here as the TA Support Center to help you with that. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Ken. Do you have a process or vehicle to hear your community's voice? Now, this is not to put anybody on the streets, on Front Street, but I will tell you, historically, when the meetings I can participate in, we say we have the community voice. What happens is that the people who run the program come and present at the program, and then at the end, maybe they may say, okay, this is a time for us to hear from the community. This is community, let's hear your voice. How about we switch that paradigm and say, hello, community, let's hear your voice. What is going on? What do we need to address? And then let's collectively figure out how we're going to address it. So do we have a process and a way to continually engage community in real, authentic relationships? That is also another TA area, to Ken's point. Process, and we're going to also, like I said, talk about this processes as we go through this academy as well. Process to track. What are you measuring? What are you trying to change? And how are you going to measure it? Hard stuff to do, and not all of us may have the skills to do it. So that's where TA will help as well. So that's more. A methodology to facilitate ongoing communications with your partners and your community. Do you have all of those things? Let's go to the next slide. This is our first poll. Would you say your CAN currently consists of all of these elements? 50, yes? Yes, over 75%? Nope, but getting ready, that's why I'm here. This is anonymous, so I don't know who you are. I got one so far. Is that everybody? Okay, we got some 20% at B, 29. All right, keep them coming. Over 75%. All right.
Angela, someone had asked, could you define CAN champions one more time?
Yeah, I'm writing an answer in the chat if you want, Angela. So
okay, thank you, Ken.
In 2 more seconds. I'm just very slow at typing, but yeah.
Me too. I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you. Ken is typing. If you still have questions, I'll be happy to come back to it. But it really is about finding those organizations, those people who can represent what you're trying to do and also are speaking with the same language. And I'll talk about how we've done that here in Illinois, in Chicago as well, and how I've done it when I get to something a little later. Is that almost about it, Olivia or Lisa? I can't tell. We're 23% who
Yep.
says yes. Okay.
That should be about it.
Okay. 23% who says they have about 75%. And then the majority of us, we're still getting there. That's why we're here. So that's okay. This is great. There's gonna be some other polls. Like I said, this is no shade on anyone, as the young folks say. Shade means nothing bad to anybody, not throwing anything bad on anyone. Because someone asked me, what do you mean throw shade? So I want to be clear when I use lingo like that, that we want to talk about. We're gonna get to all of these things, and it's not, we're trying to get us ready to take this journey. Next slide, please. So, questions. This is your time to unmute, ask questions, have a little bit of a dialogue before I move on. Any questions, thoughts? I'll look at the chat. I know Candace answered the question about the champions. Any other things you can unmute? Anything that's resonating with you that you want to share at this point? Any else? Yes, Julia, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I did want to ask, we're working right now on figuring out more about how we can incorporate data specifically into CAN progress and whatnot. So I wanted to ask a little bit about, like, historically, has there been guidelines around collecting data in terms of like the collective impact efforts of the CAN or the consortium?
I'm going to throw that ball to Ken's court. Ken.
Yeah, historically, there has not been a universal or standard that was set for all Healthy Start grantees. But I can tell you from working with consortia as well as CAN over the years, they've worked with their local evaluators. And so those that are successful, the CAN is really connected to the Healthy Start program in such a way where the data that's being collected for the program is shared with the CAN, and a process is in place of sharing that program data. And then when you're working with partners then agree to bring data to those CAN meetings, and you begin to kind of integrate the data to kind of tell the story as you're addressing social determinants of health. Different pieces of the data are brought to that CAN where they can be synthesized and then telling the story. So it involves, I know, having data agreements with some of your partners, and commitments from your partners to bring their data to the table, so there's no gaps in telling the infant mortality story. So it's about clinical things, but it's also about community interventions, and so it really requires bringing different sets of data. But the Healthy Start program is one of the biggest data sources you'll have for your CAN, and then again, whatever partners bring from the other spaces, and then just creating a process to actually, again, get that data together, align it, and so forth.
Follow up, are the data agreement things, like, is that a template that's Googleable, or yeah, that's a new word, made it up, Googleable?
As my 28-year-old son says, everything is Googleable. So I'm sure there's something out there on data agreements. They range from simple to complicated data agreements. And so absolutely, there's some things out there, because they can be as simple as complicated. Because again, if it's about a partner bringing their data and they present their data, which I think is a great way to have that kind of collaborative process in place where you present your own data. You don't necessarily have to give it to me in that moment, but it's nice when you come and present it, and then it's publicly shared, and then we can take it from there. So yeah, but there's definitely some examples out there just from simple Googling.
Cool, thank you.
I will also say too, Ken is absolutely right, because that was going to be my response, is that I don't know of any instructions that have come down to collect this data. And it's also too, what you'll find, two things. One, when you start reading in the Pathways to the Communities in Actions book, chapters 5 is talking about the different stories, but chapter 8 has tools. So as you go through this process, the next site, as I mentioned, one of our later sessions will be on data. As we go through this, we're going to be working out and trying to identify tools that work. Here in Chicago, I know I had to go through a long process in developing. We actually run school-based health centers in my organization. We had to go through a whole process with our local school district on how to share data amongst the kids to monitor their health progress. And that was just totally different, nothing the standard. So we had to develop it as we go. But I think as you go through this process, Julia, we'll be teaching, you'll be getting knowledge around some of these tools, and your readings will help get some of that information out for you as well.
Yeah, I
And
really appreciate that because one of the barriers that we're facing in my area is very rural. So almost all of our data has to be longitudinal because we have such a small sample size of almost all of our data that it can be very unreliable. So we have to like take those samples and like aggregate them, I think is the word, I don't know, but over a period of 3 to 6 years. So that's kind of the other bit too. Data's fun in rural areas, everybody.
Yeah, and I know we'll get into this because Andrew and I have already talked a little bit about that session because there's a lot of this kind of dialogue to go over, but there's exciting aspects about data for your CAN as well because, and I put something in the chat, what I've learned over the years of working with diverse CANs across the country is there's data that's really useful that the usual suspects don't ask for because they only get data to tell the story they want to tell. When you start working with the community and rural communities, native communities, there are other stories that need to be told, and there's data that the community will inform you about that you need to collect to tell their story. So that's the power of the CAN. That data is going to look so different at every different CAN, and that's exciting because you're going to look at things and look at data in a way that you don't usually do it, and that's why I like really exploring this. And so yeah, we'll get more into that, right, Andrew, when we get to that session. But I definitely, since we're talking about it now, I wanted to mention that it's going to look different, and there's other data that a CAN is going to suggest that the usual suspects bring. Or the other exciting piece about the advocacy of a CAN is other data that the community will demand that you disaggregate, because they're going to tell you that data is useless to us. You need to break it out. We need to know what's going on. That's the fun part of the CAN.
Absolutely. So I won't belabor this point, but the data will also be dictated by what you want to look at as you go through this process. So, and how you collect it and what you need to collect will dictate that. And you'll, like I said, you'll get that, a lot of that from chapter 5 in the book. Next slide, please, because we're at 10:20. We're already only 30 minutes left to go. I knew this was going to go fast. Well, we've done this. We kind of did this. What is your current focus, vision, collective impact goal for your CAN? Now, you can put this in the chat. If you currently have a focus for your CAN right now of what you're trying to look at, whether it's a social determinants of health area, whether you are actually using the collective impact framework and you have what you're getting ready to use as your framework, what that strategy is, what that goal is. I know for us in Chicago, one of ours is at My Healthy Start is to look at health literacy is one of the areas we want to address. But there may be, I know it used to be at access, it used to be housing. So what is your area of focus? I would love homelessness interventions is at Tamla's in Chicago. So fatherhood. Yes. So yeah, put it in the chat so that we can be keeping track of this. Now, what may happen is as you go through this process, you may add on other things that you wanted to have your CAN address. I know I have already begun to think about that. Community health education. So next slide, please, because I am running out of time and I do want to have time for breakout groups. Keep putting that in the chat. Does your CAN currently have, a quick poll real quick, currently have a systems change focus? Are you yes, no, not applicable, or are you in the process of developing some systems you are trying to change? I got somebody who's really quick. This is very good information and very helpful as we go through this process. I'm hoping you're appreciating this, Ken, because this is very informative, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's good for the group as they see among their academy students kind of where people are focusing, because there's some opportunities here for some synergy too.
Yes. Okay, we're getting there. A yes. Somebody definitely yes. We got 38% of the B. 54, 14% is not really applicable. I'm curious as to what you're working on. That 13% you're doing in your CANs, as well as reducing infant mortality and low birth weight. Thank you, Jennifer. I never know how long to let this run because I know I feel the pressure of the clock. I don't know if you guys, y'all probably don't feel the pressure of the clock, but I look at this little thing ticking down next to me and I'm feeling the pressure of the clock and know what else we need to cover before we say goodbye till we meet again. The local perspective of their needs. Pedro, very good. Very good. That's powerful, Pedro. Can we go to, this is very, oh, we're at time, good. So lots of us are in the process of developing. So I just want to get you ready, put a little fun in this moment, take a little break. You know, we've been sitting in front of this computer. We're gonna show you a few snippets because right now, I told you get ready to change the word. We're gonna take on a new attitude of success. So I went back because this kept resonating me as I prepared for this academy. I love Patti LaBelle, and just this song just kept resonating. I had to get a new attitude about doing this work, and I'm hoping it'll brighten your day because it did mine when I listened to it. We're not gonna listen to the whole video, just a snippet, but to get you in the mood for having more conversations. Go right ahead, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. You probably dancing. She said she loves old music. And I would love to let us listen to that. For the young folks on the call who doesn't know this was a fun time, fun video. I hope you're feeling good from your head to your shoes, and ready to get a new attitude. I don't mind if you borrow this when you go back and have your next CAN meeting. I won't mind at all. Borrow this video, get them pumped up to have a new attitude. I do love music. I see Lisa does too. So we're getting ready to move to the next level of this. I'm gonna go fairly quickly because we're at 2:33 or 3:33, wherever you are, or 1:33, depending on where you are. Health, racial equity, CAN, a new way to look at an old process. So this is what this is all about. We've been doing this a while. CAN, as I said, Healthy Start has been doing consortiums for 30 years. We've been working with folks. We've been talking about changing systems. Well, we're getting ready to look at it in new ways over these next 6 months. Next slide, please. And that's the cutest baby. Why are we looking at this? Why are we doing this now? Ken laid it out at the beginning. We saw the video from Paul's book. We saw it. Just in this last year with the national pandemic, the murder of George Floyd and the many other Black and brown bodies who have, and the Asian American hate crimes and all that is going on, we see that the time for change is now. Health equity is still a dream for most communities of color, as we just saw from when Ken's opening in 1965 and beyond. We know that African Americans spent 400 years in slavery, so the time for change is now. Our CANs, as I have said, are positioned to impact these systems and facilitate positive change in our communities. We are positioned. If you ever doubted it, doubt it no more. Go forth and understand that you have the ability to make changes in our communities and address some of these issues. You might never have thought about it before in the way that we're going to be talking about over this 6 months, but I guarantee you are positioned to do it. You're going to be finding your champions. You're going to be working with other agencies. People are talking about this. Healthy Start is national. And when we checked in earlier, we saw that where people were coming from Kansas to California, from North Carolina to Ohio, Chicago. We're all over the place. We are positioned across this country to make a difference. And so who else, if not us, then who else? So let's move next slide. For those of you who had the opportunity to be a part of AmCheck this week, I was, and I saw that AmCheck, City Match, NICSQ, Healthy Start Association have all signed on to this commitment to racial equity. So it's happening. It's happening all over the place. As I said earlier, the next slide, please. As I said earlier, I was in 3 meetings today just dealing with this issue. I happen to have the fortune to listen to Dr. Arthur James. Most of you probably know Dr. Arthur James in our Region 5 meeting. And he said these words. He said, in Region 5, the infant mortality rate between Black and white babies is not shrinking, but it was growing over the next, I believe it was 10 years. That was scary to me. That was unacceptable to me. That says, oh yeah, we got to change this paradigm. So I had the opportunity to talk to some young undergrad students recently, and I shared with them, it's time to make a change. You can influence that change. I meant them as young professionals, and I mean it to us as CAN leaders and leadership in Healthy Start movement. We can change this paradigm so that the next time he presents this data, it looks vastly different than what is being predicted right now. Historically, we know that African Americans and American Indians and African natives remain consistently at the top of the statistical charts for the highest poverty rates, infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, unemployment, unequal pay, and many other chronic illnesses. When I launched a campaign here in Chicago called Closing the Gap many years ago as a part of the Healthy Start Initiative, addressing infant mortality, addressing prematurity in SIDS, one of the politicians, one of the community members says, "Why us all the time?" I know you guys get sick of hearing that paradigm. We're about to change that paradigm. So it's not us all the time. We're going to shrink these gaps, make a difference. What you see on the slide on the chart is very small. You can't probably read it, but it's looking at the poverty rates in the country. And as you see, unfortunately, once again, Native Americans and Blacks are leading the way when it comes to poverty rates. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the terms real quick. I'm at 3:37. Oh my Lord, defining the terms. So I'm gonna go through this quickly. These slides will be made available as well as this presentation. Next slide, please. Racial equity. We've been talking about racial equity. What do we really mean? And Ken was very clear to me. He says, Angela, let's make sure they all understand what racial equity means. And so I pulled some definitions to make sure we are all on the same page of where we're coming at when we talk about racial equity. And we'll talk about racial equity, we'll talk about health equity, and I'll talk about that, why that was important for me. Racial equity is a condition that will be achieved if one racial identity no longer predicted in a statistical sense, like I just said, how one fares. When we use the term, we are thinking about racial equity as one part of racial justice, and thus we also include work to address root causes of inequities, not just manifestation. This includes the elimination of policies, practices, attitudes, and cultural messages that reinforce differential outcomes by race or that fail to eliminate them. Racial equity defined, and this is done within that racial equity toolkit, a mindset and method for solving problems that have endured for generations, seem intractable, harm people and communities of color most acutely, and ultimately affect people of all races. This will require seeing differently, thinking differently, and doing work differently. Racial equity is about results that make a difference. It's about a new attitude. Next slide, please. Health equity. And this is the Robert Wood Johnson version, definition of health equity. Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. This requires removing obstacles to health such as poverty, discrimination, and their consequences, including powerlessness and lack of access to good jobs with fair pay, quality education and housing, safe environments, and healthcare. So all of you, those that have listed what you're working on, you're in this space. You're addressing health equity at your Healthy Starts. You may be addressing some racial equity issues. Next slide, please. There's another definition real quick. Health equity defined, and this is the World Health Organization. Equity is absence of avoidable and remedial differences among groups of people. Therefore, involves more equality with respect to health determinants, access to resources needed to improve and maintain health and health outcomes. Next slide. And then the CDC, more of the same language. Health equity defined. Health equity is achieved when every person has the opportunity to attain his or her full health potential, and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of their social position or any other circumstances. Powerful stuff. And is this the next slide, please? So there are many more definitions. I'm not going to read all of those definitions. You can certainly go back and look at them later, but there's lots of definitions when it comes to the social determinants of health. And because we may be looking at changing our CAN by looking at it through the social determinants of health lens, which is what they do in the communities in action. They use the social determinants of health to define how they're going to look at health equity. And we know that the constructs of health, of racial social determinants of health is looking at where one person's live, their education, their income, housing, their physical environment. All of that is a part of when you're looking at the social determinants of health. And so they use that as a lens. But what they also highlight in that book is some people actually look at racial equity as what they wanted to look at and address. Here in Chicago, around maternal mortality, we're looking at it from a racial equity lens. And so we're looking at talking about how doctors are trained and things like that. So next slide, please. So I put this in there because I weighed back and forth as I prepared for this academy. I'm like, okay, well, should we look at it from a racial equity lens? Should we look at it from a health equity lens? And I'm going to leave it up to you, because as you go back and do this work, you have to do what feels naturally in your communities. And I guarantee you, because both, if you look at health equity, at its core is race. When you look at racial equity, at its core is race and ethnicity. So you've got to be able to put your work in the perspective of what you're trying to do from a racial or health equity lens. I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions, because that was some heavy stuff right there, and see if Ken wanted to add anything, because that was kind of deep to me. So I just want to take a pause.
No, while folks are thinking, I think you're right. It is heavy. And that's why when we talked, we thought it was important that we share the definitions that we're going to use as a community. Again, the curricula that you'll find for these modules, these are the definitions we're working with. The racial equity tools that have been proven, the pathways to health equity that curriculum that you're going to use. All of these are definitions that are used widely and have been really tested through implementation of different types of programs and projects. So it is heavy, but it's important that we all have that common language. So thank you, Dean Ellison, for, again, choosing the right definitions that we want to go with as a community. And there, again, I think are relative to the other aspects of Healthy Start that refer to these definitions from the CDC, from WHO, et cetera. So these are the right ones to use. So thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So real quick, I've got to ask this. I know we're really running out of time, and I'm hoping we can do these breakout groups. What does health equity look like for you? When I use the term health equity, this is where you can unmute and talk to me and talk to us. When we say health equity in our communities, what does that look like for you? What would it look like if we're successful in this work? What would health equity look like for you, your community? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I can start up, because I think for me, I look at it personally, for one, because I am a Black man in Chicago, and I carry that everywhere I go. I'm always going to be Black, and I'm always going to be from Chicago, and you're going to know it. And even with that, I still feel reserved or hesitant when a doctor kind of pushes back at me when I say, oh, I used this to help me out. And they're like, well, you shouldn't do that, but don't give an explanation as to why. And they don't try to see it how I see it, in a way to say, oh, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but this is a better way to look at it. And health equity for me, is to understand where someone is coming from, but in a way where you can help them get to where they need to be. And right now, we're not getting that help of getting where we need to be. We're kind of being pushed towards it, and we don't like to be pushed. We like to be guided and helped to get to the right place, and not forced, because we've been forced for 400 years to do things we didn't want to. And that's what I feel like we feel that. We feel that forced, and we don't want to feel that anymore.
Okay, thank you, Guy. So I was just giving warning that I got about 5 minutes to do about 30 minutes more of the work. So I don't know how this is gonna work out, but we gonna keep it moving. So thank you, Guy. Anybody else got a burning statement they want to talk about? What does health equity look like for you? Because what I got from Guy is that you have providers who respect your opinion, who hear you and respond accordingly. That's part of what we heard, that whoever we are. Jennifer wrote in, access to health and mental health would be truly affordable, and providers would show empathy. Absolutely. That's what health equity looks like for me. I'm gonna move on. I got 5 minutes. Is your organization currently involved in racial health equity work? Give you a few minutes to answer this poll. Told you wasn't gonna be just able to sit back and drink coffee on this meeting. Gotta put the fingers to work.
And Angela, you said a few minutes. I would say a couple of minutes, since you're working with your time.
I know.
Sorry.
I know. We're not gonna be able to do our breakouts, and it's a really exciting breakout, but we'll do it.
Angela, here's the good news though, Angela. You have 6 months. We have the next session too, so you can add it in.
Yes. Oh, this is exciting. Is your organization, about 67% says yes, and some says early stages. So this is exciting. This is right where we need to be. We're poised. And that's what Ken kept saying. He kept saying, we're poised, Angela, to do this work. How awesome is that? Isn't that powerful that we're at the same place? We're poised to make a difference. You're gonna hear me say that all the time, because I know we can.
Can.
The can. Yes, it can. Like the little engine that could. Are we ready for a few more seconds? Because I got about 2 seconds. Next slide, please, because I'm not going to be able to do the next slide. So I'm not going to talk about this. You'll be able to hear my story many, many more times. Keep going. I do want to stay here for a second. No, I'm going to come back. I'll do it later. Keep going. So what will we be doing over the next 6 months? Closely examine our CAN work through health equity lenses, using social determinants as our framework for beginning this process. Explore our own agencies and organizations' role and capacity to address these systems that impact the health and well-being of our families, and to develop a comprehensive plan in partnership with our communities and other stakeholders and the residents and the participants to examine and ultimately influence these systems that negatively impact the health and well-being of our families. That's what we're doing. That's what this is about. See the little girl at the bottom, she pointing up. That's what we're getting ready to do. Change the world. Next slide, please. Any questions, any thoughts before I turn it back over, I think, to Ken or Olivia? I'm not sure. Olivia. If you have questions, because we're moving really fast, put them in the chat and we'll come back to them. We're not doing that today. So keep going. There you go. Go ahead, Olivia.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to launch a post test with the same questions we asked in the beginning. It should pop right up on your screen. So we'll just take a minute or two for this, and then we have some closing slides.
And Olivia, what we can do, and Angela, the next time we come back, we'll actually show the results of both your level of understanding at the beginning of today's session and then at the end, which we'll do each time we get together. So we can look forward to seeing that for session 2 as well.
I think someone also asked in the chat if they could get a copy of that leaders book.
Yep, Lisa put the link in again for the communities in action. Yep.
No, the book by Paul Schmidt.
Yeah, I think I responded to Tamala. We'll see if we can make that available to folks. Maybe it can be part of our closing of the sessions and as a completion type of thing. So we'll see what resources we have for that. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna keep.
This is Tamala. I just wanted to say thank you, Angela. You know, she's been my mentor for years. She was the first project director that I really worked under. So thank you. Great job, Ken, as always. I wanted to share this because it's burning. And so I hate using the word health equity. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we work in so many silos, and racism being so prevalent in our lives, we become numb to what happens in some of our communities. I'm on the west side of Chicago. We probably make the news, national news, about the violence in the community. And I was talking to my brother, and my brother was saying to me, he said, you know, I would love to buy a house right in the city, but me staying in the neighborhood is not going to change what's going on around me. And so when we sit in our cans, I think about, we're doing the work, we want to do the work, but will it change how the doctors treat us? Will it change how our community is treated? And so sometimes for me, I get in a rut about it almost. And I just can remember Angela saying this when we got on the task force here in the state. We've been at this a very long time, and we don't want to be doing this another 20 years from now. As you stated, Ken, something from 1956 still resonates today. And we keep saying health equity. And it's just a simple word. We need change. So that was my little vent.
And well received, Tamala. So you know you're my shero, so definitely. Olivia, thank you. Very, very well received, and more to come on that. More to come, because I think we're gonna have lots of dialogues around that issue, because I think many of us are feeling very passionate around this issue, that the time for change is now. Go ahead, Olivia, I'm sorry. I took a minute of your time.
No, it's okay. Thank you. It looks like we have almost everyone responding to the survey. We have about 20 or 76%. So we're going to keep that up. If you haven't responded, please respond. But now we're just going to go through the homework and next steps. So for your homework, Angela would like you to read a few chapters from the Community in Action Pathways to Health Equity book. So again, you can access those chapters for free. You can download them as PDFs using the link that we'll put in the chat. And your project director can fill out that survey to request one hard copy for your Healthy Start project. And then there are a few questions that Angela would like you to think about while you're reading before the next meeting. We will send these out in an email, so you have all that information, and we'll post it on CoLab. Next slide, please. Angela, do you want to jump in for this slide?
So here too, there's a part 2 to your homework, because now you're pumped. You're ready, you got a new attitude, you're ready to move next. So besides the homework readings, I want you to go back and do some assessments. Let's do some assessments and some pulse taking of where we are as a CAN. Examine with your team and your organization and your CAN. What is your CAN's and organizational history in addressing health equity? What is your CAN's leadership membership experience in addressing health equity on a system level? Who are your CAN members and who's missing from the table? What is your CAN's current focus and how you begin to move towards a shared vision and collective impact? And to Tamala's point, to get out of this rut of doing the same thing the same way that we're still talking about this 20 years from now. What data collection systems do you have in place? Maybe you don't have one, as Julia said. Maybe you don't have anything, but begin to talk about what do we really want to know as we do this work. And then that's when we find the tools, is what do we want to know? What do we want to change? What is our readiness to take the journey? What do we have and what do we need to move our CAN to the next level of evolution? Those are questions you're going to go back and explore with your team, with your CAN, with your bosses, with everybody as we move to this next level. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, Angela, I think this is you too.
Oh, yes. And so, I like to always end with a quote. I found the quotes that always resonate with me. And so I'm going to read them real quickly. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And that's Barack Obama. Never doubt, and this Margaret Mead's, this statement always resonates with me because I've seen it happen over and over again. We saw it at that clip earlier that we showed earlier. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that has. And I heard someone say this statement earlier at the AmChip conference, and it's very, very important. The revolution will not be televised. We're going to be making the changes. We may not get the big sound bites. We may not even get on TV. We're going to be able to watch it on TV, but we're going to know that we're creating a revolution of change. So thank you all. That's it for me. So I'm going to turn it back over to Olivia. I can't wait to see you next time because we're going to really dig in it a little deeper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was wonderful. And before everyone signs off, we have one more survey for you. This is a satisfaction survey, so we can get a sense of how this first session went, and we can tweak the next couple of sessions accordingly. So you can either scan the QR code on your screen, or I'll drop the link to the survey in the chat. And if you could please fill that out before you sign off, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize this completion of the survey, and it's exciting because you all are the inaugural Learning Academy for the Community Action Network, and so your input is really, really important as we set the stage for future academies on the CAN. So please just take a couple of minutes to complete the survey. Again, use your phone, scan it so it can come right up on your phone. It'll take a couple of minutes, or if you need to, just click on the link that Olivia has dropped in the chat. But it's really vitally important for us. And you all have been great in completing surveys and answering questions today. So just complete that right to the end. Do a great job here for us, please, so we can do a good job for you the next time. Thank you all too. I'll just take that moment to say thank you to our Dean, Angela. Again, it's wonderful to be able to work with you in this way. We've known each other for years, for decades. And because of the work that you have done in your community beyond the Healthy Start program, and your work has definitely been influenced across the nation through other work that you've done. So we are happy to have you here at the TA Center and serving as our Dean. And those of you who chose to be part of this inaugural CAN Academy, it's really exciting to have each of you. And it was nice to see in the beginning the representation from around the country. So we look forward to the Academy. Again, a commitment to reading. It's not a place just to come hang out and spend time on a Zoom. We really want to make this a valuable experience. And as our Dean has shared, there are lots of engagement. So lots of reading and homework as if you were in school. That's why it's called an academy instead of just the webinar. So thanks for being here. And again, welcome to this great and first CAN Academy. Thank you again, Angela, as our Dean.
So we'll stay on the Zoom as people finish up that survey. If you already have a great day, and we'll see you at the next one.